It's time, everyone. It's been almost 3 years in the making. Hi guys, this is DPX and welcome to the top 110 Hidden Gems. Now today we are counting down the bottom 25, 110 to 86. Now, not to say that these are the bad games or anything, but they are just towards the bottom. I've already explained all the rules in a separate video, so go check that out if you want to know. But since there are 25 games in this video, I can't do it all by myself, so I'm giving 5 of them over to my buddy Slash. But without further ado, since this will be a long one, let's get started. Before we do so though, if you like this video, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, and leave a comment, and you'll be a little subscriber. You like the letter V? Do you like difficult games? Well, VVVVV is the game for you. I should have also asked if you like stupid titles. VVVVV is a really good game and very difficult due to its precise gameplay, and you really have to think when you do stuff here. It's sort of like Gravity Man's stage from Mega Man 5, where you go up and down, but in this game, you do it to avoid the spikes, which makes everything very difficult. But you're probably wondering, well, that's all well and good, DPX, but why is it at the very bottom of this list? Well, I made a video about the Steam version as if it was only on Steam or whatnot. But it turns out there's actually a version of this game for any other platform, including your browser. So that sort of takes away from it being a hidden gem, if you ask me. But it's still a good game, and it should be very cheap on anything, or you can play it on your browser. So go try this game out.
Number 109.
To be honest, despite the fact that I made an episode about this war of mine, The Little Ones, and the fact that all these games aren't that popular, and a lot of people forgot about them, I completely forgot this game existed, and I completely forgot this was a Hidden Gem episode. It's higher than VVVVV because it's not available on your fucking web browser, but I believe I only made this episode, it was a while ago, but I believe I only made it because I saw this, and I saw it was free on PS Plus, and I got it, and I thought, oh, I can make this one, this would be a good hidden gem, and I also heard good things about it. It's a fine game, it's nothing special, it's what most people call a cinematic platformer, which isn't something too often. It's similar to the Flashback, Prince of Persia, the original ones, the Oddworld games, and Blackthorn, which by the way is a game we're gonna get into much later on this list. This game just really isn't that memorable. I can't really remember much from my playthrough. It's a fine game, but nothing much to write home about.
They're like that. If other things work, they will flower by themselves. So there are only 108 with which you can work.
Talk about games that aren't much to write home about. Wizards and Warriors, an NES trilogy developed by Rare. Should be more exciting, but the first Wizards and Warriors isn't. Now granted, 2 and 3 are way more exciting and will in fact show up later on in this list, but the first one is a little rough, but not too bad. The game is very clunky and it looks weird, especially for the NES standards. I don't like the colors they chose, and the jumping is also really weird. It almost looks like you're riding on a broom, like you're a witch, and enemies come at you like nothing. The platforming is weird. Bunch of weird stuff in this game, but it's a little underrated though. If you Google reviews for this game, they're kind of negative, and they shouldn't be too negative. It's just not something special, though.
Chaos number 107! Galaxy Eyes Attack!
Okay, this is the last game with not much to write home about, I promise. The Lone Ranger on NES is a movie-based NES game that isn't published by LJN, which was pretty rare at the time, to be honest. And nonetheless, it was actually kind of good, though, due to its placing on the list, not too good. What's interesting is this game actually uses a light gun. Or you have an option to use a light gun, which wasn't too common. It also goes for some very high prices on eBay. Like, if you want to get it new and sealed, it'll probably cost you up to $100. It's a bit weird, like the controls I found pretty weird, but yeah, the game's nothing special, but at the same time, something more people should have played.
I exceed summon number 106!
Now, I love Super Smash Bros., and I admire the games that take inspiration from it, like Brawlhalla. Now, Brawlhalla is very similar, with some changes like being much more floaty, having a triple jump, and items actually being a key part of the gameplay. But you're probably saying that this game isn't a hidden gem, and you're right, it's not. But when I made this episode, it definitely was, as not too many people were talking about it. Which is why it's this low. Because when I was looking at the videos I made, I'm like, wow, I made a video about Brawlhalla? It was also the second episode, so I made it a really long time ago, and it was not a good episode anyways, but since then, it's been ported to every platform possible, and has many guest characters to boost interest, I guess. Characters like Rayman, Hellboy, Shovel Knight, Finn, Jay, some dude from Rivals of Ether, which is another game like Smash, John Cena, Becky Lynch, oh yeah, and like a million other WWE wrestlers. Okay, that's a weird one. Definitely try this one out since it's free.
The number's 10-5, so use this number, please.
Did you know that Curious George doesn't have a tail? The tip of Pikachu's tail isn't black. Darth Vader doesn't say, "Luke, I am your father." Looney Tunes is actually spelled Tunes and not Toons. And the Berenstein Bears are actually the Berenstain Bears. Oh, and they have a pretty good Genesis game as well, called Berenstein Bears Camping Adventure. Now, this is only the Genesis version of the game, as the Game Gear version kinda fucking sucks. But for a game that just looks like glorified shovelware before shovelware was even really a thing, it's not a bad platformer, if a bit generic. It's by no means perfect either, as you're very bouncy, and some of the mechanics, like throwing rocks, they go in an arc, which can be very annoying. But you can look past that, and you got a pretty good platformer on the Genesis. It sounds good, and the controls can only be clunky at times, but for the most part are fine. It's not that much of a hidden gem though, which is why it's pretty low on the list. Mystical Ninja is a game that you'll hear later on in this series, and so is Goemon. So here's Goemon's Great Adventure, aka Mystical Ninja 2 starring Goemon, aka Mystical Ninja starring Goemon 2. Though this is nowhere near as good as its predecessor, nor is it even really as good as The Legend of the Mystical Ninja on the Super Nintendo, hence its placing. Goemon's Great Adventure is still a fun little ride. The first one was more of a traditional 3D platformer, and while Great Adventure still has some 3D platforming, it's got a lot of 2D platforming too, making it very unique. It's a fun game to play on your Nintendo 64, but it does go for some high prices. However, the cheapest is about $30. We got a few Castlevania games on here, but one is a game without Castlevania in the name, but is kind of linked to it, that being Kid Dracula on the Game Boy. The game is very simplistic, but it still manages to be fun and somewhat challenging at the same time. Though it's on the Game Boy, and most of those games haven't held up very well, like at all, Kid Dracula managed to do so, and do so very well. With great precision and enemies that get you thinking, while also being simplistic, the Game Boy version of Kid Dracula is a game that more people should have played. It's not higher just because it doesn't go for that much money on eBay, and I only made a video about the Game Boy version without even knowing about the NES version. So I didn't have a video for the NES version, which also means that the NES version isn't on here. But that version is so much better. Talk about Game Boy versions of other NES games. Most of the Game Boy ports are just sluggish, greatly inferior versions of other NES games, but Kid Dracula might not have been an example of that, and neither was Ducktales. Though definitely not as good as its NES counterpart, Ducktales for Game Boy is still a very good way to play Ducktales. It's almost the exact same game, but what's cool here is that in the case of this game, that's okay. A Game Boy version of an NES game doesn't have to be different, or at least too different. Just fun, or at least get the job done. Ducktales for Game Boy manages to do that. It's just not higher because, again, there's a much better version to play it on the NES, or even the remastered version for that matter.
Now don't take this the wrong way, but you are a Terminator, right?
Cyberman Systems Model 101.
We'll have quite a few shoot-em-ups on this list, one being Gunneck. Gunneck is a shoot-em-up like Gradius or Life Force, but nowhere near as good or, of course, as popular. But it is interesting as the certain power-ups are cool, you get some that like go everywhere and shit. Pretty cool. It's just a basic yet entertaining shoot-em-up that people should have played more and went under the radar. This game isn't higher because there's not much to it. It's not like that good, but it is worth a play, and it does have some very interesting power-ups, so that's something. Okay, for the next 5 entries will be done by my buddy Slash, so take it away.
Number 100, we got the company Sunsoft, who published some NES games. Yeah, they published Blaster Master. That's number 100. Yeah, buddy. It's a unique game because it combines the platforming genre with vehicular combat, but that wasn't a thing. So they really flipped the format up there. So it's more like a platformer, honestly. You play as a tank. It's kind of fun. It's not higher, unfortunately, because it got a remake. It's not an unfortunate thing, though, but, I mean, I like blasting. I'm the master. This won't be the only time you blast a master.
Next entry of this iconic series. The last player standing wins. 99 players.
Hey, guys. Do you know Konami? Well, before they were making them Pachinko machines, they were in the gaming market. Yeah, buddy. They were making some quality games, and they were putting some good stuff into the market. And one game that they put out, Tiny Toons on the NES, was pretty cool. They follow the show really well in the design. You can see most of the characters from the TV show in the video game, like Busta Bunny and Plucky Duck. And the level designs are kind of like Mario, but that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, you know? And there's not really that much to say about this game in general, but it definitely should have been played more. So, that's it.
Alright, now let's get to the number of the day, or the chart of the day. Today it is a number, and it's a whopping 98%.
As you all might have noticed, there's some hidden gems on the Game Boy. Quite a few, actually. So we got another one to add to the collection in Solar Striker. And this wasn't a genre that was too common on the Game Boy. The Solar Striker was a solid shoot-'em-up game, and it might even be the best one on the Game Boy. Like, there aren't really that many on the Game Boy. Nobody like really talks about this game either, because like Game Boy games were pretty hit or miss at the time. And it's not really that much higher because you can literally like start bidding for the game on eBay for 1 cent. A cent! You know what's a really good game in the Final Fantasy franchise? Final Fantasy number 15. Like the Burger King foot lettuce. I mean, you know, whatever. I'm gonna just disregard. Square. They're still focused on making this game rather than making Final Fantasy 16. They wanted to make spin-offs, and one that they made was a King's Tale Final Fantasy 15. While Final Fantasy is the most well-known JRPG franchise, A King's Tale actually changes the genre into a beat-em-up with some RPG elements thrown in there. It didn't really go over well when Final Fantasy changed its genre, but it's good to see that this game was actually pretty good. Unfortunately, no one cared because Final Fantasy switched genres, so people were like, nah. But I mean, it is free, so there's no point in not trying it. Most of the licensed games on the NES were done by LJN, but when the Super Nintendo came around, there were a lot of licensed games that weren't just done by LJN. One instance of this was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Some people say that this game is a little clunky. I don't think so, neither does DPX. I will say it is kind of humorous how every single ranger has the exact same body type, even the yellow one and the pink one. They just look like color swaps for the guys. And they're not guys, they're goyles! But if you can look past that, you got a very underrated, very solid beat-em-up game on the SNES. Not to mention, the boss fights are totally sick, and so is the music. You should check this game out. It's not too expensive. It's like about $13 on eBay.
That's over the course of thousands of official games. But could that number go up? Today, we're going to look at why averaging 95% from the foul line is almost impossible.
Let's talk about the Sega Master System. Sega Master System might be one of the weirdest consoles, as Sega supported it and the Genesis simultaneously, even though it was originally meant to rival the NES. One game it had was Teddy Boy. This is certainly a weird gem, as you control a kid chasing what seems to be evil teddy bears, and I think your name is also Teddy. This is a game I'd like to call a maze game. You're in a maze. Not too much to say about it. It's a good game, and you should definitely find a way to play it. Though, as you'll see later, there are a few more games on the Master System that are better than this, though.
IXC summon number 94, Crystal Zero!
Hey Slash, hope you had fun talking about Blaster Master, but now it's time for the squeakquel. Blaster Master 2, aka Blaster Master Jr., aka Blaster Master Boy. Why does this game have so many titles? Despite it being on Game Boy, it's actually better than the first one, as it's pretty different. The first one was a platformer, where you play as a tank, but this one isn't a platformer, it's another maze game, and you play as the guy who is in the tank. Or at least a little adorable version of him. I mean, look at him. It's actually a fun ride on your Game Boy and deserves to be played.
93 multiplied by 1 equals 93.
There are surprisingly few games based on MCU movies. Which, yeah, I know the movie-based game trend sorta died out around that time. But the MCU is so big that I expected a lot more games to come out of it. But we did get Thor God of Thunder, which was shit, but on the DS, it was surprisingly much better. Since there had to be differences in the gameplay, the clunkiness from the console versions are absent and plays a lot better on the DS. many problems with the console version. It looked stupid, it played stupid, it was just a very poor game. The DS version is simple, and that's what makes it good. Do give it a play because of how underrated it is. It's only underrated because it's a different version of a much worse game.
डायलैंडेड में आज बाज सबसे पहले एक बार फिर उन करतूतों की
Now for a more recent example of a hidden gem. Before Bethesda was all about that money with that Fallout First. Seriously, did you guys even think this through? They actually made quite a lot of great hits. Critically, a lot of their games didn't sell too many copies, and one example of that would be the 2017 version of Prey. Now, after canceling the sequel to the 2006 version of Prey for seemingly no reason, Bethesda decided to reboot the series with this new one, and it was really good. You got cool new characters and cool new weapons in a game more people should have played, and only didn't because of how poorly it was advertised. But it's not much higher because many people did eventually catch on to this game.
These 91s are here to remind you McDonald's McLean Deluxe is 91% fat-free. No, we're not. But you're all 91.
Not. Home Alone is a movie franchise that you might expect to get like a game or two, but I doubt anyone knows why there's this many games based on the Home Alone movies. And only the first two, nonetheless. And can you believe? They're all bad. All of them except for the one on Sega Genesis. Home Alone, and I must stress, specifically the Sega Genesis version, is actually really good, as it recreates a lot of the scenes from the movie really well. Stuff like that one scene with Kevin sledding down the stairs and somehow making it out the door. Yeah, the movies don't really make a whole lot of sense. That was implemented really well, as it's a way to navigate to like one level to another. And it doesn't feel clunky or anything like how the other versions of the Home Alone games do. You might be wondering where Home Alone 2 for the Genesis is, and that one, while not terrible, is just alright, so it doesn't make the list. And I also didn't make a video about it. But this one, however, deserves to be played. Ninja Gaiden is cool. Got a lot of really cool games, but not for a while. And while I can make an entire separate video on how the series should come back, for now, we can talk about the Sega Master System version. While it is Ninja Gaiden at its core, it feels different from the NES versions. It actually feels like a mixture of Ninja Gaiden and Shinobi, which is a popular Sega franchise. While the Sega Master System version of Ninja Gaiden isn't as good as its NES counterparts, it's still a fun game to play nonetheless, and deserves more attention. Worms is a series with a lot of games, and a lot of them sorta just blend together, but they're still a lot of fun, if a bit slow. One game is Worms Armageddon. It's cool is that like you got a bunch of different worms, and it's sort of like an RPG in a way, like you control them one by one, and you also try to make like forts and stuff. I don't know why I'm saying forts, but you try to make ways to move. I don't know, it's interesting. This is one game that I don't have much to say about. I mean, the Worms games sort of just speak for themselves. If you like the Worms games, you'll like Worms Armageddon, as it's Worms at its core. Very enjoyable, and you should play it.
I was proud to do it then. I'm proud and honored to do it now. Ladies and gentlemen, number 88, Eric Lindros.
Back to the Sega Master System. Now we have Dynamite Ducks. Now, it's actually one of the best games on the Sega Master System, as it's sort of a beat-em-up. You're like some sort of bird beating up little dogs. I wrote dogs, but they look more like reindeer. I cannot tell what they are, actually. And there's also little squirrels shooting at you. You're being attacked by random animals for no real reason, but there's a rush to it, because it's just so funny. Plus, the character that you play as kind of looks like a character from Sonic the Hedgehog. He almost looks like Bean, whatever the fuck his name is, from Sonic the Fighters, but blue. Dynamite Ducks is another game where there isn't much to say, but it's a fun game to play. So I mentioned Brawlhalla earlier as a game like Smash, but it wasn't higher because it got really popular. But there's another game like Smash, and this time it never got popular, which is why it was much higher. And it's a Tom and Jerry game called Tom and Jerry Fists of Fury. What, you think I'm kidding? No, I'm fucking serious. This game is awesome. Tom and Jerry Fists of Fury is a fighting game that is like Smash if it were to be in 3D, so think of it as like Power Stone. It's a fighting game with your beloved Tom and Jerry characters from Tom and Jerry, of course, but also Spike, Tyke, Duckling, Nibbles, and Butch. The problem here, though, is that I just listed the entire character roster to you. Like, there's not much else. But if you ignore that, you have a fun fighting game that fits the theme of Tom and Jerry very well. Man, it's a shame this was never at EVO. Look, I'm not all saying that my videos about these hidden gems helped these games gain more traction, but Comix Zone doesn't make past the bottom 25 because of how many times it's been re-released. Comix Zone is such a unique game as you play as Sketch Turner, and you're trapped inside of a comic book. Man, he really fucked up. It's sort of like a beat-em-up where you're fighting comic book-like enemies, and it's a lot of fun. It's not higher, though, because, yes, it was released when the Genesis was dying, but Sega can, and will re-release this game at any opportunity they can get. Think of any Genesis game compilation. Comix Zone is most likely on there, but boy, should it be on there. Well, this was a long one. I appreciate you guys watching this one to the end, and if you're not tired of these games yet, don't worry, we got another 85 more games to go, so stay tuned as I'll have more parts very soon. Bye, guys.